Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the ancient texts to peel back the layers of a god you probably only think you know. Because when we hear the name Hermes, a very specific, polished image usually pops into our heads. But as we dig into the historical artifacts and mythological records, we're going to see that the true Hermes is far more complex, a whole lot darker, and infinitely more interesting than the pop culture caricature. So let's jump right in. So is Hermes just a messenger? Look, if you're picturing some glorious delivery boy from Mount Olympus zipping around the clouds in winged shoes, you are completely missing the bigger picture. The historical reality is that Hermes was one of the most omnipresent, deeply respected, and honestly widely feared deities in the entire ancient world. Because this guy has a seriously diverse portfolio. We're talking commerce and trade, sure, but also thieves and stealth. He rules over sleep and dreams, yet he has these incredibly deep ties to the underworld. He's the master of boundaries, the protector of shepherds, and the patron of language and oratory. So how does one single god rule over the marketplace, the grave, the pasture, and the thief in the night? To figure that out, we need to peel back his layers. Let's start with Section 1, the winged messenger. We've got to start with the face we all recognize from classical art, right? The swift Olympian herald. As the personal emissary of Zeus, Hermes needed to be incredibly fast, and his iconic gear is exactly what lets him move so freely between the mortal and divine realms. He rocks the talaria, those beautiful, golden, immortal winged sandals. On his head is the podasos, a wide-brimmed traveler's hat that sometimes sprouted wings of its own. And in his hand is his ultimate symbol of authority, the Caduceus, a winged staff wrapped with two copulating snakes. This wasn't just decorative, it physically allowed him to cross boundaries other gods simply couldn't touch. Now, we've really got to clear up a massive modern misconception about that staff. Have you ever noticed the medical symbol on an ambulance or a hospital? Often, it's the Caduceus, two snakes and wings. But that's actually Hermes stuff. The symbol of commerce, negotiation, and sometimes even putting people to sleep. The actual, true symbol of medicine is the rod of Asclepius, which has just one snake and absolutely zero wings. Somewhere down the line in modern history, commerce and medicine got completely visually mixed up, which is pretty ironic if you think about it. Moving on to Section 2, boundaries and the underworld. So let's peel back that first layer and look at his darker, more ancient roots. Long before he was delivering memos for Zeus, Hermes was a chthonic deity, a god of the earth and the underworld. He was what the Greeks called a psychopomp, that literally translates to soul guide. Hermes was the one actually taking the hands of the newly deceased and safely guiding them across the ultimate boundary, that terrifying road between the living world and the dark underworld. The ancient Greek playwright Aeschylus really hit the nail on the head with this description. O mighty messenger of the gods of the upper and lower worlds. Hermes wasn't restricted to the bright, sunny peaks of Olympus. He was deeply respected and constantly invoked as this powerful mediator who could seamlessly transition between the highest heavens and the deepest shadows. He was the absolute master of the in-between. And this physical connection to boundaries is literally where he gets his name. His name likely comes from the word Herma. Originally, these were just simple heaps of stones at crossroads where travelers would toss another rock for safe passage. Eventually, they evolved into carved stone pillars topping out with a bearded bust of Hermes and featuring an erect phallus at the base. Placed outside households, they symbolized male fertility and protection. He was literally standing guard right at the threshold, linking the ordinary home directly to the divine. Which brings us to Section 3, the divine trickster. Now, there is a wild, mischievous flip side to this boundary-crossing god. The sources actually describe him as a deified trickster, calling him amoral, like a baby. What does that mean? It means his deception and thievery aren't viewed with our traditional moral judgment. He doesn't steal because he's evil. He steals because it's just his nature to be clever. He crosses boundaries of ownership just as effortlessly as he crosses the boundaries of life and death. And honestly, that is exactly why he's the patron god of both merchants and outlaws. You see this perfectly out of the gate in the Homeric hymns. On the exact day he was born, literally as a baby, he slips out of his crib, finds a tortoise, kills it, and casually invents the very first lyre. But he doesn't stop there. That same night, he sneaks off and steals the sacred cattle from his powerful older brother, the sun god Apollo. He even made the cows walk backward just to confuse their tracks. When Apollo furiously tracks him down,
Baby Hermes just plays the lyre so beautifully that Apollo forgives him entirely and lets him keep the cows in exchange for the instrument. He's the ultimate schemer, right? Just smoothing things over with unmatched charm. Or take the famous myth where he earns the title Argifontes. Hera had set up this terrifying giant with 100 eyes named Argus to guard a prisoner. Now, you can't exactly sneak up on 100 eyes. So what does Hermes do? First, he uses deception, dressing up as a humble shepherd. Next, he uses magic, playing sweet music and using his Caduceus to slowly charm all 100 of those eyes to sleep. Finally, he uses swift violence, slaying the sleeping giant with a curved sword. Stealth, deception, and magic. That's the Hermes way.
Finally, let's dive into Section 4, the ultimate shapeshifter. Here's where things get truly mind-blowing. We're going to see how this god evolved and shapeshifted across cultures long after the Golden Age of Greece. Hermes is ancient. We actually find his name written on Mycenaean linear B tablets way back in the Bronze Age. He survives the collapse of that civilization, becomes the classical god of Athenian crossroads, and then he adapts. As Greek culture expanded into Egypt, and later during the Roman Empire, Hermes didn't die out. He syncretized.
Look at how flawlessly this adaptation worked. When the Greeks went to Egypt, they saw Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom and writing, and basically said, "Yep, that's our Hermes." The result was a combined deity, Hermes Trismegistus. They saw Anubis guiding the dead and merged him with Hermes to create Hermanubis. The Romans took his traits, blended them with their Etruscan god Termes, and gave us Mercury, the god of trade we still name planets after today. He just kept absorbing attributes, becoming more and more complex.
But that Egyptian connection, that is a real game changer. By merging with Thoth, he transforms into Hermes Trismegistus, which translates to thrice greatest Hermes. At this point, he's no longer just a messenger. He morphs into this legendary sage at the absolute center of esoteric wisdom, alchemy, and astrology. The writings attributed to him became the foundation of mystical traditions that lasted for centuries.
And amazingly, he survives the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of Christianity. During the Middle Ages, scholars euhemerized him, meaning they decided he wasn't a god at all, but rather a brilliant historical mortal man. Highly respected Christian philosophers believed he was a contemporary of Moses. They thought he was part of this one-true theology running through history. Early Christians essentially repurposed this ancient pagan trickster into a profound prophet who they genuinely believed predicted the coming of Christianity. They didn't discard him, they elevated him.
So think about this ultimate paradox. From a Bronze Age boundary stone to a cattle wrestling infant to the herald of Olympus, and finally a revered medieval prophet of hidden wisdom, Hermes crosses every boundary conceivable. He's the god entrusted by the divine to deliver the absolute truth to mortals, yet he's the exact same god who invented the lie. So if the divine messenger is also the master of deception, how much of his history is just another trick? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the boundaries, and I'll see you next time.